Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. We're going to begin by introducing ourselves. If you're a newcomer, please introduce yourselves again. I'm Jim.
My name is Steve. Josh. Freddie. My name is Henry.
My name is Jerry.
Jim. Bob.
Stefan.
Carrie.
Krisha. Matthew.
King.
Alfonso.
Renee.
Noel.
I'm Brian. Ricky. Ian.
Hi, Natalie.
Bill.
Jack. Pedro. Robert.
Tony.
I'm Richard.
Michael.
Welcome. And online we have Ed, Jeffrey, Scott, Daniel, John, Kelly, Kay, Harley, Steve, Samuel, Jeff, Andre, Frank, Chris, Gitas, and Jadino. So welcome everyone. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and today we are privileged to have Feit Oakes, and he teaches Buddhism and somatic practice, focusing on the integration of meditation, trauma resolution, and social justice. He received teaching authorization from Jack Kornfield and wrote his dissertation on extraordinary states in Buddhist meditation and experimental dance. He teaches at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, East Bay Meditation Center, Insight Timer, and locally, and he'll be leading our GBF retreat in April. We're looking forward to that. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Hi everybody, welcome. Good to see you again. Good to see familiar faces and a few new. Lovely to be back here. I've been only in the virtual the last couple times I've been with the JBF, so despite the fact that we've experienced a minor death in the family and we're down to one car rather than two, living out in the country, my family let me take the chariot and leave them stranded to come down here and be with you in person. So it's a joy to be back in the neighborhood I lived. I lived like a few blocks from here for many, many years in the 90s. Some of you may well have been around here then. You look like it anyway, or longer. And it's lovely to be. Here. We are doing our spring retreat this year, as we have the last couple of years, at the beautiful Tibetan temple of Vajrapani Institute in the Santa Cruz Redwoods. Come and practice with us. It's in a few weeks, April 15 to 19. Get your taxes done, and then come celebrate. And this year we are doing a loving kindness retreat, a metta retreat, and I'll speak, as I did a month or so ago when I was here, a bit more about loving kindness and that practice. So, if you've never dove into loving kindness practice in a retreat setting, I really recommend it. It has a whole different feel from the usual retreat that we have been doing, that we did last year and the year before. And so if you have questions about that, let us know, and it'd be lovely to have you there. So that's the commercial. Um, so, when the Buddha would speak to folks in the towns as he visited, as he traveled around speaking, very often he was teaching folks of many different backgrounds. He would teach lay people of many different social backgrounds, including many different spiritual orientations. And in those contexts, different from when he taught the renunciate monastics of his own community, he would always start by speaking very broadly about the foundations of spiritual life. Those foundations always begin with the practice of generosity and giving, the practice of caring for each other in wise relationship, keeping the precepts, the ethical practices through which we create safe and safer spaces for each other in relationship. And very often from there, he would give as a foundational meditation practice, but also just as a foundational way of being in the world, the practice known as the divine abidings, the blessed resting places of the heart. And these are heart practices, cultivating the emotions or the noble states and emotions of love, compassion, joy at the well-being of others, and equanimity, the balanced heart. So these are known as the Brahma Viharas in Pali, the early language of the Buddha. In some traditions, they're known as the four immeasurables. And this word immeasurable is a lovely description of these, particularly as meditative states, because one of the things that you may have an intuitive sense of from having been, let's say, in love or troubled by the intensity of suffering in the world, or delighted upon hearing the well-being of someone that you care about, is that emotion, as we find ourselves in relationship with the world, can be an enormous experience. You can feel love or care or empathy or concern or delight as a kind of all-encompassing field, right? And, it's not random, I think, that our literature and entertainment and movies and culture very much are about these core big emotions. Whether you're into romances or the more explicit variety of romances that are abundantly available now that you could entertain yourself with, delighting in the feeling of things that we could call love in their enormous manifestation, becoming overwhelmed, overtaken by feelings of love, You might be drawn to kinds of literature or culture that emphasize the suffering of the world, whether that's like activist-oriented documentary culture with the aim to get you inspired. How many folks were at a No Kings protest yesterday? That's a good quorum of the room. We were up in Santa Rosa. I was there with my family, listening to resistance songs and reading all manner of vulgar placard. More F-bombs on placards than my son is allowed to hear in his sheltered Waldorf life all year. So that was his exposure. It's homeopathic, So maybe you're drawn to, this kind of culture where you're engaged in the suffering of the world and you get to feel something big around how do we protect those around us. Maybe you just engage with the news and, this week, just to offer a moment's turn of our attention, for instance, among the many, many, many countless, innumerable traumas in the world. This past week, to deeper news coming out around a massacre in Sudan, unfolding right now, in the town of El Fasher and other places. And, I read about this and had to do a thing that I think we should do more often when we read terrible news, which is I closed the computer and had to go outside and just be with the fierce dissonance of having this very safe, sheltered, beautiful life up in the hills where I live in Sonoma County with the redwoods and the red foxes and kind people all over the place. And to just know that in this place of the world, horrendous violence based on ethnic and religious difference and power and, of course, water and oil and money and guns and is unfolding. And just to feel that and what it is to be in a world where that is happening right now. And that feeling can feel, I think, partly why we use words like overwhelming for things like, I read the news and I was just, couldn't deal. Or, in all of the directions, is that these Brahma Viharas, in this case, compassion or empathy, the texts say that compassion is the quivering of the heart in response to suffering, but it doesn't always feel like a quivering, does it? It's more like the shattering sometimes of the heart. That these states are immeasurable, they're enormous. And so, both in the pleasant and the unpleasant, the emotions that arise when the heart connects with the world can be huge. That's part of our nature as emotional beings, as feeling beings, as feeling animals. And so the Buddha would teach these as wholesome processes to cultivate. And, there are unwholesome emotions not to cultivate that are also immeasurable, right? Like greed, hatred, and delusion, the great poisons that pull the heart into despair and wrong action. There's also the recognition in the tradition that those forces, which are of course the forces behind the tragedies, behind the genocides, behind the situations in the world that inspire compassion and other things, that those poisons are also without perceivable beginning, right? In the Buddhist tradition, there's no moment when the universe is created and it was pure and there was no sin and no horror. That's not part of the story. The Buddha remembers the past in an infinitely long procession of lives and cultures and communities, and he sees confusion and grasping and hatred and bias and misconduct all the way back. And so he says that there's not an escape to a pure thing that was before, or a pure heaven that will be later. He says the escape from this greed, hatred, and delusion is only in your own heart. And, sidebar, I think my friend Jesus said the same thing, and that was a little twisted over time by some folks. But, the kingdom of God is within you and us. And in the Buddha's system, the meditations on love and compassion and joy and equanimity are the foundation for the wisdom teachings that would come later. And this is partly why he would introduce them so early. He's talking to people from all over. They haven't taken on yet his core practice, the practice of the Noble Truths, to investigate deeply suffering and its causes, and see how through the uprooting of those causes, suffering itself can be uprooted from the heart. before he even gets to that, he says to folks, invoke the quality of love and then spread it through your whole body. And then let it shine out from your body in all directions so that it can shine upon all beings around you without exception. And of course, without exception is the hard part of the instruction. The foundational practice of the Brahma Viharas, of the divine abidings, is translated often as loving kindness, but good translations also are friendliness, benevolence. You can just translate it as love. There's a different specific word for intimate love, romantic love, love that has desire in it. Metta is really like the universal, infinite love that is impersonal. And so friendliness, in a way, is a nice translation of it. And I like benevolence, a certain basic kindness of heart. Because, of course, there we are at the march yesterday, and my kid is learning to be a nice, young, radical progressive. Because the apple hopefully doesn't fall too far from the tree. And so of course he's learned that there are certain presidents and authority figures and billionaires who it's really fun to insult and make balloons of them as babies and things like that. And he finds that all very funny, and all the curse words towards authority figures and billionaires that he's learned to dislike, owners of car companies, things like that the kids make fun of nowadays if you live in certain neighborhoods. And his his well-meaning Buddhist parents say things like, absolutely, we share that view. We wish that he were not in power, maybe even in jail. But we still care for him as a being. Like, we don't want to kill him, right? And the 10-year-old in his 10-year-old logic is like, I'm going to invent, like a poop-loaded ballistic missile, and it's going to go here, and it's going to destroy these people in this way. And we're like, yeah, no, but yeah, no. And it's really core to how we want to talk about forces in the world that we really disagree with, to be able to say, we disagree with people's actions and words and choices, and the actions and words and choices of the folks who are putting those guys in power. But everybody is clearly trying to be happy, trying to find a way for their heart to be at ease in a really difficult world. And yeah, lots of folks, including us sometimes, are making choices to try to attain that. And those choices are wrong-headed. Our mistakes are going to cause harm, and in some cases cause very deep harm. But those people still want to be happy, and they still want to be free. And actually, when the heart can be taught to not cause harm, or constrained to not be able to cause harm, and, yes to that, and inner ease and happiness can more easily result. And so the Buddha gives this teaching of loving kindness and compassion and joy and balance of heart to kings as well as common folk, to folks of all castes and all genders and all social backgrounds. At one point, the Buddha is visited by a king who is the son of the old king, who was a friend of the Buddha's and a great supporter of the Buddha's. And this son was really hungry for power. His name was Ajata Satu. And he's kind of one of the big tyrants of the Buddha's time. He did a lot of conquering and pillaging, that sort of thing. And he comes to the Buddha late one night, on a moonlit night, because his heart is not at ease. And he first asks all his ministers, how could my heart become at ease? And they've all gone to these different spiritual teachers of the day, and they all say, well, there's this one teacher and he teaches this, and there's this other teacher and they teach this. None of the answers satisfy this king. And so then finally, one of the ministers says, well, the Blessed One is in town. The Buddha is in town. We should go see him. And the king says, all right, let's go see him. And he knows that the Buddha was a friend of his father's, and his father was a supporter of the Buddha. Ajata Satu is king because he has taken the throne by force from his father, imprisoned him, and murdered him. So we have a tragic king in the old style. And he's going to his father's teacher for consolation. So they saddle up the horses and elephants, and they get the whole royal retinue, and they go out at night, out to this grove outside of town. And as they approach the grove, Ajata Satu says to his minister, is this a trap? Are you leading me into a trap? The grove is so silent. There's no way there could be, hundreds of people here practicing. I can't hear anything, and that's what the heart does when it is not at ease in the world, right? It says, is this a trap? Am I in danger? Right? That's part of the, when our kid says to us, Dad, don't you want to be a billionaire like, Mr. X? And I say, no. I mean, I'd be a better billionaire, I would spend my billions on way better things, but I also know what it's like, or at least I don't know what it's like. I know what it looks like to be in a position of power like that, and it looks paranoid and vigilant and stressful. Not that I wouldn't like a bit more of a paycheck, but not enough to make me paranoid, stressful, and vigilant. So Ajata Satu is paranoid, stressful, stressed out, and vigilant. And his minister says, no, this is the Blessed One's community. They like silence. You're fine. And they go in, and the lamps are lit in the pavilions, and all the monks and nuns and devoted lay people are meditating in pure, perfect silence. And the Buddha is sitting in radiant stillness against the central pillar. And the king comes in, and he begins to ask questions. What's spiritual life really about? What comes of it? What actually happens when you practice? Because I'm not getting it. And the Buddha says, good things happen at every step of the path. When you learn to be generous, when you give to support others, your heart becomes more at ease. You begin to learn to let go, to cling less, and your relations become better, right? You start to give to people, and you stitch together the fabric of the community. You start to govern better. Right, he's talking to a king. At other points, the Buddha is going to say, kings, the way to reduce crime and increase social well-being is to, this is only a very slight translation, tax the rich and spread the wealth to the poor. He says, support merchants in their business, support farmers in their farming, support poor people who can't work to have a sustenance. When everyone is well cared for, there isn't poverty. This is the ancient, what the Thai reformer in the 60s, Ajahn Buddhadasa, called Buddhist socialism or Dhammic socialism. So the Buddha's orientation is clear, right? What can we do to serve the well-being of many? So he says to the king, give more, and it will bear fruit in your own heart and in your relationships. The king says, you got to give me more than this. And the Buddha's, yeah. So now keep the ethical precepts. And he knows who he's talking to. He knows this kid, right? The Buddha's older than him. He knew his dad. You keep the ethical precepts. Don't kill people, right? Don't cause harm. Don't steal. Don't commit sexual misconduct. Don't lie and use harsh speech. Don't misuse intoxicants. These will lead to the well-being of your heart and the health of your community and relationships. The king's like, okay, I need more than that. And the Buddha starts to say, okay, then, and he actually goes into a very long ethical section, so go and read it. This is Digha Nikaya 2, the Long Discourses number 2, The Fruits of the Ascetic Life. It's one of the most gorgeous story teachings in the canon. And then when the Buddha starts to come to like, okay, there's all of that. And a lot of that is the external. You start with the external. You start in your relationships, in your community, and in your work, in governance. And you start with giving. When you get onto your own heart, then there's a different kind of work to do. Because although it's true that giving and caring for people in your relationships, ethically, caring for your actions, it's true that this has an impact on your own heart. Still, those ancient poisons, you've inherited greed and hatred and delusion from forever back, you are fearful because you were taught to be fearful. We manifest bias in the world because we were taught to be biased. The way that Dr. King said, no child is born racist. They have to be taught it. Right? Nobody's born homophobic. They have to be taught. No one's born sexist or misogynistic, or hateful in any way. It has to be learned, taught. It's taught through culture. It's taught through family lines. It's taught through everything we consume, intentionally, but mostly unintentionally. And then we land here and we find when we turn inward that, we say, oh, may all beings be at ease. That's the core mantra of loving kindness. Sabbe satta sukhito hontu. May all beings be at ease. And then the heart goes, yeah, but not those people, not those evil people, right? That's the conversation that we have with our kid. Like, yes, those people, When my kid says, well, what do you want to happen to him, the evil president? We say, I would love for him to retire. And there's a lot of things. Justice, yes. Long footnote about the efficacy of the justice system and whether it's right. Imprisonment or is correct. Yes, all that. But in the basic conversation, it's like, I would like him to not just be prevented from causing harm, but be inspired to not cause harm. Right? I would like all of the people, and this isn't really about one person, this is really about all the difficult people in your neighborhood, the difficult people in your apartment building, the difficult people, at every level of our world, right? The difficult uncle in your family that makes it hard to go home for a visit. At every level. And then, of course, we're going to get internal and say that difficult voice in yourself that says, I'm not worthy of this, or I'm not good enough in this way, or I can't, or I hate, or I don't like, or I whatever. So every voice in the fractal of our world that is acting out of unskillful ancient forces, that's karma, basically, right? The inheritance of toxicity we bear and have to heal from. That all of those forces are inspired in the direction of goodness, inspired, like the wounded king, to go for solace. Even though, right, the medicine is bitter sometimes. Because, of course, the medicine is you have to face your own heart and your own actions. If we could say to the difficult people everywhere, come back into the community of folks who care, and we will care for you. That folks who are cared for and well tended don't cause harm in the same way. Try not to cause harm. The ancient karma is forceful, I really try not to cause harm. And I stumbled a little yesterday in a conversation with somebody that I'm very familiar with and I felt very comfortable with. And I talked a little too freely about something that I didn't like. And it wasn't skillful. And so I spent the rest of the day feeling that and feeling it in my heart and think, oh, that wasn't skillful. And talked with them, we have to do this in large and small ways. And so the practice that the Buddha says, that he gives to the wounded king, is this core practice that rides on the way that emotions can get really big. It says, turn your heart toward loving others and yourself. Being compassionate toward others and yourself, joyful and balanced of heart in relation to others and yourself. And do this in a way that your state feels boundless. And so the meditation on it is, based in focus and stability of the heart, like all of our meditations. It essentially says, invoke the quality of friendliness. And you can invoke it lots of ways. You can think about people you like, dogs you like, whatever, right? Beautiful places. You invoke the quality, and there's lots of detailed ways to do this, and, commercial again, we will do this on retreat, in a detailed way. But there's also, in a very simple way, just the core intention. Bring that friendliness everywhere you go. Bring it to every person. Bring it to every situation. Bring it to the news. Bring it to your family. It's not easy, right? It doesn't say suddenly the difficult people in your life will, experience your friendliness and, recover from all their ancient twisted karma and suddenly be, not difficult people anymore. That will not happen, right? Like every kind of healing, you meet the ailment, you meet the symptoms in as holistic a way as you can. And then you deal in a real way with the result, right? Difficult uncle remains difficult, sometimes for a very long time. You hear beautiful stories of, there's this guy, black activist in the South, who made it his practice, who found that his practice led him toward kind of one by one becoming friends with these elderly KKK members, these old white supremacist guys. And that bit by, kind of just like one friendship at a time, he changed their karma together through relationship. Right? I think this was part of, that famous call of Harvey Milk's early on to say, everybody come out. Because once all the gay folks come out, everyone will know that, there's folks everywhere, right? It's not like this tiny, people over there, radicals in San Francisco are weird, everyone else is not. No, there's gay folks everywhere, right? Come out and normalize, and there's a long conversation about assimilation that is complex, But part of that call was be in direct relationship, be in a direct personal relationship with folks that has loving kindness at its core. So you come to this quality of loving kindness, of metta. The Sanskrit variation you'll hear often is maitri, same word. Friendliness, benevolence. You invoke this quality, and then in meditation, and then bit by bit out in the rest of our life, you hold it as the foreground. What would it be like for friendliness to be the first quality that you bring to any new interaction, right? You walk into the corner bodega, and whatever's going on in your life, you bring, you lead with friendliness to the other people there, whoever they are, right? You walk into a room full of new folks, you lead with friendliness. Even if friendliness is not the MO of that place, you're going into some situation where the other qualities are in the forefront. Maybe competition is in the forefront. Maybe eros is in the forefront, which is, not always friendly, right? Right? It's a different quality. It's a different kind of love. Maybe you walk into a place where, politics and concern and even compassion or fierce compassion is forefront. You could still lead with friendliness, lead with a kind of warmth of heart. So the Buddha teaches this, gives this to the king. The king keeps asking, I need more, I need more, I need more, all the way until the Buddha does teach, the noble truths and deep concentration and seeing through your identity and all of your stories with insight, and finally uprooting greed, hatred, and delusion completely. And in the end, he says, after describing the full and final liberation from suffering that the path leads to, he says, and great king, there is no fruit of the spiritual life deeper or, greater than that, than full liberation of the heart. And the king, so wounded by his own actions, essentially, says, thank you. I'm busy and I have to do more things. And the Buddha says, do your thing. And the king leaves. And the Buddha says to his people that are assembled, he says, monks, nuns, the king is broken. The king is wounded. If it had not been for the terrible action and choices that he made in killing his father for the kingship, his Dharma eye, his wisdom heart would have opened right here with us as he heard this talk. But he was unable to see. The actions that we have that have brought us to our suffering, our continued suffering, can sometimes be so heavy in our hearts that it's hard to see the truth, even when it's handed to us, with utmost generosity from the Buddha themselves. It's hard to see it. Loving kindness is the beginning of the inward turning of our practice. I think because there's no better way to start the process of relating intimately with yourself and shifting your way of being in the world than starting with love, than leading with friendliness. Because of course it's true for us internally as well as for others. When you turn inward in meditation or inquiry or therapy or any kind of inner work to try to deal with your own feelings and suffering, lead with friendliness, right? Don't lead with all right, you awful person, we're going to dig up your shit and I hope this works this time, I'm going to try to fix you now, right? Try leading with friendliness, for a long time in my practice, I just called myself sweetheart. I would come into meditation. Meditation was always really hard for me. Everything has been hard, it feels like. And I would sit down for meditation, or I would enter yet another retreat. And at the beginning I would be like, all right, sweetheart, I love you. Here we are again. Just lay it all down on the altar. Do your bowing. Chant the verses. And, yeah, it's kind of just I love you, let's do this. And it really helps. It helps in every one of our relationships. So with ourselves, with our family, with our community, with everyone around, and with the difficult people. Bless them. May they find the ease of heart. May they recover from the eons of trauma that lead to causing such suffering in the world. May all the broken kings find solace and change. And may the broken kings and queens in all of us find solace. So this is the practice of metta. So here's the mantra for metta to end. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. So it's sabbe satta, all beings. Sukhi, happy or at ease. Hontu, being, becoming. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. So I'll do it a few times around. Join in if you want. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. 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 3 more. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. Sabbe satta sukhi hontu. Thanks for your friendly attention. A few minutes for a couple responses or questions. Please.
I've been doing, especially since the last retreat, I've really incorporated metta into my morning meditation. And the difficult person I've chosen for the past number of months was Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Blessings, sir.
Darned if, she started saying some things that I agreed with,
Right.
And I don't think it had anything to do with it.
But you never know.
You never know.
I don't know if folks heard, but this is a friend in the community who was on retreat last year, said they've been incorporating metta in their morning practice since the retreat and using the Georgia politician Marjorie Taylor Greene as their difficult person. And lo, she seems to be changing, as we all do. There have been generally the standard line is that metta is for your own heart. Don't think of it as a projectile out into the world. But there have been, particularly in the very sort of tantric and magically oriented Middle Ages, there were sub-strands of the tradition that thought about metta as a kind of social magic. And so I'm perfectly happy for you to think about it that way. This kind of magic, like all magic, is complex. So don't expect linear results. But you know what happens when millions of people start loving each other. The world does change. And so please, may our practice be effective for folks in power, but folks everywhere. Absolutely. At the very least, what a lot of folks find is that you kind of burn through difficult people because you send metta to them for a few months, and suddenly you feel friendlier toward them, not as hateful. That's good for you. But then of course, if you want to keep doing difficult people practice, you got to find somebody else. Otherwise, eventually difficult person practice just becomes kind of like, yeah, you too, And I think that's actually a very sweet way to relate to evildoers. Please.
Yeah, Ernie. So, there's a lot of things that came up, but one of them was about you speaking to your child, and I had 2 students of mine, they're 9 years old, and they came to me and asked, is it true that the president molested children? And at that moment, I was trying to like think of a skillful way to respond, right? Like acknowledging like what they're saying, but also like being mindful of where they are in their life, and also. So I said, yes, unfortunately, we have people in power not making good choices, or choices that we as a community are still debating and don't always agree on. So there are problems, it's true, but hopefully if you focus on reading and math, you'll be able to bring some better answers for us. And that's why I'm here as a teacher, to try to give you those tools.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I resonated with what you were saying, because sometimes I mean, where everything's happening at the same time, but then we sometimes are not aware of like the impact that it has.
Yeah.
Especially the most vulnerable people around us.
Absolutely. Is the text such that people online can actually hear this?
Pretty poor.
It's poor.
I was wondering about
All right.
that.
So I'll do the thing where I paraphrase and repeat. This is a teacher speaking with 9-year-olds who asked, "Is it really true that the president has abused children?" And really talking about, like age appropriate responses that that come from this spirit. Like, yes, it's unfortunate that there are folks in power who behave in unskillful ways, and we as a larger community have to work to contain that, address it, learn how to talk about it, figure out what's true, use our language skillfully also. I think it's always true. Like, you don't want to lie to kids, and you don't want to give too much information, A couple years, my kid is 10 right now, so about the same age as your students. And, a couple years ago when it was really heated, but he was early 9 years old maybe, he did say, like, "Dad, I know you always make things simpler for me, but can you tell me actually what's happening in Gaza?" And I was like, "Oh, dude." Like, I don't know if I can for myself, but, and I had to stop myself from being like, okay, well, we're going to start with the Ottoman Empire, and maybe we have to go back to the Persian, the Byzantine, like the abduction of the, Hebrews in the Bible. So I'm like, okay, no, that's not where we're going. And I had to try to come up with, like, okay, I want to vibe with this person who's 9 years old, and I'm not going to lie. And I'm also not going to say, I understand all of these complex, geopolitical dynamics. And I think it's a beautiful practice to try to say, how can I be real in the relationship and educate, like try to teach on these things, and age appropriate. I mean, that's always going to be a thing. If we had a conversation in this room where the prompt was, what's really happening in Gaza or anywhere. I mentioned Sudan earlier. If we were like, what's really happening in El Fasher? To get into the long history of the relationship of, competing ethnic groups in the Sudan, that's deep, history that I don't know enough about, and maybe I know more than half of y'all just from being a reading nerd, but I still couldn't give a lecture on it. It's very complex. And we would have the same conversation of like, all right, well, it's difficult. Let's try to just be in real relationship around how the world is unfolding. And so I think it's beautiful, to come from a core intention to be real and treat people sincerely and with respect, whatever age they are, and then try to craft, how can we come to a deeper understanding together? So this is very much, I think, part of, it's part of why speech practice, it's part of loving kindness practice to really meet folks with, respect and friendliness in this way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. So it's just lovely to be here. Thank you. Come on retreat, April 15th to 19th, down at Vajrapani. Affordable, delightful, love all the time. And reach out as needed. So my own weekly group is Tuesday nights, so it doesn't interrupt your practice here. Come and join us, and it's lovely to have any of you all anytime.
Thank you so much. And now we open up to announcements.
Yes, just regarding the retreat, all the information is on our website, and it's open to people of any identity. You don't have to be queer even, but all genders are welcome. And scholarships are available, so don't let money stand in your way. Just look at the website and you'll know who to contact, and we'll be in touch with you to make it work for you.
Good.
Hi, I'm your host today. Please stay and enjoy the company of the Sangha. There are refreshments and hot water for tea. When you're finished with your tea cup, please put it in the sink and I'll take care of it. I'll be going around with a Dana bowl to accept contributions to cover our expenses. Your generosity is appreciated. Donations in the range of $10 to $20 help the Sangha meet the expenses. These include honorariums for our Dharma speakers, rent for this beautiful center, monthly dinners prepared for Larkin Street Youth Services, and our quarterly newsletter made mostly to people in prison. There's a newcomer sign-up sheet on the credenza. If you wish to be included, receive our Sangha membership directory. Please sign up and include contact information. Some members go out for lunch after the meeting. Everyone is welcome to join them. The group meets at the front door around 12:30.
Great. And now we'll close with the dedication of merit. Do you want to show us?
I can do it. Okay, doing some chanting. So, as it is traditional, we offer the merit and the blessing of our practice for the well-being of all. You can imagine that as we practice, there's a kind of force of goodness that's generated in the room. You may be able to just feel it. It is real. And so with our sending of merit, you just imagine that force spreading out from this room, out in all directions to touch all beings everywhere without exception. Here's how that's chanted in the ancient language. Sambe sata sada hontu awera sukha jivino katam punya palam mayam sahabe bhagi bhavantu te. Hotu sabang sumangalam rakantu sabha devata sahaba buddhanupavena soti hontu nirantaram. Hotu sabang sumangalam rakantu sabha devata sabha dhammanubhavena sohoti hontu nirantaram. Hotu sabang sumangalam rakantu sabha devata sabha sanghanubhavena sohoti hontu nirantaram. May all beings be well. May the devas protect you. By the power of our practice, may all beings be free. Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.